Hello, this is the Harbor and Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. So feedback is immensely important. Feel free to reach out, and I do appreciate those who do. So some of the audio platforms that I'm on Speaker, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, just to name a few. And also I have a Shopify link. You like custom shirts, t-shirts, that is. You like custom tumblers. Feel free to check that on out. See what I got. Alright, so this episode is centered around fan theory on the show Monk. Here we go. Okay, so my thoughts before I get into the aspects of fan theories about Monk. So this is also in relation to the show Poker Face, which is quite interesting because the show Poker Face in itself, the creator, if I'm not mistaken, has said that he gained inspiration from the show Columbo. Now I grew up watching shows like that, Columbo, shows like the Mob Squad, with the streets in San Francisco. What's it? Oh my gosh, the list goes on. With Telly Savalas and Kojak. I grew up seeing shows like that. You know, from the era which in the 1970s, and from that, my mom particularly, introducing me to, things that is from her generation and the aspects of that. And I find it quite interesting when you delve deep down into the aspects. And then also how this relates to, I'm going to also talk about the show Psych too. Okay, so getting back to what I'm saying initially right now here. So, 60s I've delved somewhat into it and talked about. So, this was the time where people were, hey, I want to just focus in on the aspects of making a living day to day. I am not really interested in the whole political fight, sort of get into that mentality of fighting against the system and stuff. But now I came to my sense of reality. I got to make a living. So what next? And you have shows. Well, the Mod Squad, I would say, is more 60s than anything. But you have shows like Columbo, for instance. They focus in on the aspects of people asserting their power in different facets of careers and aspirations in their careers. And most of the time it's really affluent people, but it's it's just a wider range. Because that show lasted for so many years. It went beyond the 70s. It even went on into the 90s. That I think even perhaps almost the 2000s. I think I have to check into that when I talk about Poker Face and address more about Columbo. But anyhow, Columbo was the character Columbo was very interesting because, he's this unassuming man. He comes off as the aspects of this doofus, and that and himself. He knows how to play his hand. He knows how to play his cards so he can get what he's looking for. And that really relays a lot into the aspects of Monk. But Monk is on another level. So some say that, in the aspects of it's quite interesting. It's really very different with the show, where there is a character who is dealing with real struggles, blinding struggles of fear, and he's trying to overcome those obstacles. And so, when you have a show like that, how does that play into the aspects of crime and justice? And so some say that, again, alluding to the Columbo persona, that it's just a facade, and he's using that to his advantage so he can distract the culprits. And some say that it's an altered ego. It's, so many different layers to that. And so, as I said again about the aspects of fan theories, like them or not, disagree with them or agree with them, they all collectively try to fill in the subplots of what doesn't really make sense. And also, sleight of hand with that too, there can be the aspects of just, without understanding the real aspects of something, just generically saying an observation without understanding the source. And I relay this to Eureka. So Eureka is really one of those unique shows, which I said, stressed, and which I talked about on Monday. But I'm going to reiterate, because I think that they're completely different subject matters, completely different genres, Monk and Eureka. But the unique value that they have is they are specific to something. And so, when you get into the aspects of fan theories, it's quite easy to just generically, hey, it's this, when it's not. It goes against the aspects of what the source is. Because Eureka was a lot of plot that centered around time travel and all these different unique circumstances that is very hard to say this with a fan theory. And I think that is relation to the aspects of Monk. When you dig deeper into the actual source of the show and get different insights about it in itself, compacts the people to really, if they want to or not, to really see what that means, when the ones who seen it and one who don't, and all these things are the ones who have seen it and just missed out on it or something. It just cultivates very interesting theories. And so that's why I think it's valued to also address the central focus of fan theories. They also give a lot of commentary about the cultural value of something at the time. Alright, with this said, I'm going to get into the facts about fan theories on the show Monk. Alright, and of course sources will be provided for you in this episode. So, moving them right along, I'm pulling up the facts on fan theories of Monk. Okay. Alright. So it says, oh no, that is wrong. Sorry about that, folks. Doo-doo. Oh, yes. Oh, do. Okay. All right. I guess inadvertently. Well, I guess I might have. Let me pull it back up for you. Okay, sorry about that, folks. Okay, sorry about that, but just pull it right back on up. All right, so here we go. It says fan theories about the character Adrian Monk from the television series Monk are numerous and varied, so often exploring the psychological narrative underpinnings of behavior and past. One prominent theory suggests that Monk is actually M from Whammy's house, implying he was raised in an American wing of the institution. So, from what I understand, I think this has to do with Death Note. So, possibly as a part of a government project to create exceptional minds, with his father not being his biological parent. Another theory posits that Monk is faking his mental illness, particularly after season 2, using his exaggerated symptoms to manipulate suspects and gain medical excuses for rudeness, and maintain a facade while living with a younger woman. And so this is quite interesting. So this relates to this aspects of today, and I'm going to talk about this one situation. Generically, I'm going to talk about it. So, I encountered something like this where, and you don't really know the person, and then his friend said, well, he's just into a line of rudeness. He's just using that as an excuse to not actually say the obvious that he's actually, rude. And so this also goes into the long line of the aspects of what we see today when people are misdiagnosing themselves, or their own personal therapist, without actually seeking help or seeking the help of family, trusted friends and family, and just rudimentarily saying, "Oh, this must be true." And it's the fact of the matter is, if you're looking for something and to confirm your bias, then you're gonna find it, And so that's really a lot. I think a lot of commentary to the aspects of how that's so relatable to what we see today. And so this is also test and proof of why I think shows that withstand generational attention is because at the root of the matter, they really center around things that are very relevant to whatever sort of cultural roadmap that will come along in the future, because in a sense these things never really change when you think about it, or they only amplify, or they change slightly, but they still stay to the root of the matter of the issues. All right, so this theory is supported by the observation that his symptoms shift from a comedic exaggeration of anxiety to a more controlled performance, and that he replaces his competent assistant Sharona with Natalie, who is less capable. And I would say that with the difference between Natalie and Sharona is this. Well, Sharona was, thinking about the aspects of, I need this, and I used to be a nurse, and I need this job for the sake of my child. So it's mostly what was running through her mind was the monetary aspects of it. But I would say with Natalie, when she came along, I would say that she helped the over arc of Monk becoming more human, because she had more of a shared interest in his well-being than necessarily Sharona did. Alright, so some fans speculate that Monk possesses psychic abilities interpreting his obsessive compulsive behavior, and it heightens his senses as a result of extra sensory perception that makes him accurately aware of danger and chaos, which he attempts to manage through rigorous routines. Conversely, other theories suggest a darker origin, possessing that Monk murdered his wife, Trudy, and is suppressing the memory, which explains his obsessive yet ultimately futile quest to solve her murder. This theory is bolstered by the idea that his detective skills were used to conceal the crime, and his inability to solve it stems from his own guilt. The character's relationship with his brother, Ambrose Monk, is also a subject of speculation. Ambrose is seen as a homage to Mycroft Holmes, being more intelligent and skilled in deduction than Adrian, but lacking the drive to act on his insights. Some fans theorize that Ambrose cared for their mother during her long illness, and his dislike of Christmas may stem from a traumatic event which happened in '64. Why they choose '64, I'm not quite sure about that, but okay. Because, I guess they're alluding to the aspects that really traumatic events, are likely to happen to you in your child age and where you're most vulnerable, and you're accessible and to be molded in certain ways. All right. Additionally, there is a theory that Monk's entire life is a fantasy, with the world around him being a construct of his mind, possibly triggered by a mental breakdown following Trudy's death. So the character's connection to other detective archetypes such as Columbo, like I said, Sherlock Holmes, and Hercule Poirot. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that character. Y'all reach out and tell me about it, And, like I said, if you're interested, I will, like I always do, have a source provided for you so you can read what I read. So further fuels theories about his identity and the nature of his reality. So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper and go into, which I like TV tropes. This kind of give a widespread viewpoint. Most of the stuff is a little bit more liberal leaning, but for the instance and the sake of the matter, that is very relevant because it also goes into the census of what people from a liberal point of view, and then me reading from a conservative point of view, how those things, correlate with entertainment or, or other stuff. All right, so Adrian and Ambrose are a part of a secret project. It says the government managed their upbringing as an attempt to create mines they could use against the Russians. It also goes on to say a government agent, killed Trudy when she was getting too close to the truth about her beloved husband. She did not tell him because she wanted to be sure before she destabilized her sensitive husband. Destabilized her sensitive husband. Monk's father is not really his father. He is trying to make amends for what he did to a pair of children, but has to be careful in case he gets in trouble with current government. And then, I can see how that can happen, how this fan theory can cultivate. So there's a particular episode in Monk where his father revisits twice, but the first time he comes is a Christmas episode, and so you see photos of him and Adrian and Ambrose, and then they're both talking about their mom and his disposition that he has with Adrian. It just looks like, when you have that mentality, which is, not digging in deeper by saying, sometimes a cigarette is just a cigarette mentality. And you see what, this is just showcasing the aspects of an absentee father. But when you put in the element that he's just a government agent and he's trying to do his best, he feels he has a guilty conscience and he wants to try to make amends, there's a whole new light to the situation of him abruptly leaving. But there is a plot burst to this particular fan theory, because when he comes back again, his father announces that he married and he has another son. And then the repetitive problem of him being absentee father is present because he again abandoned his second family, if you want to, well, essentially that's what it is. But the difference is, which he picked up, he was more present when he could, and then he just ultimately left. All right, so it is possible. So Whammy's house is, let me get into that. Yeah, Death Note. Okay, I'm just double checking about that. Yeah. Okay. And as I said, Sentient, let me go into depth about this with the aspect that there is Monk is actually M in a reality situation to Death Note. Says since in England, A is known to have committed, the act of suicide, perhaps it actually was Monk and he faked his death due to the pressure put on him to be the next L. And living with BB would drive anyone to the brink. That's interesting. So Monk's been faking it since the beginning of season 2. It says, notice this when his symptoms went from cartoonish yet tragic exaggeration of anxiety disorder to something resembling no real mental illness. That's also interesting. And so Randy Disher is actually David Cassidy. Let's check this out and see what this is. So they look alike, they act alike. After leaving the special victims unit in New York, he changed his name. He moved to San Francisco and joined a department more comfortable for comic relief. He has a Freudian slip in the episode. Mr. Monk is up all night when he shows up at a crime scene late at night in his Captain American pajamas. When the captain jokes he needs to get back to Gotham City, Randy corrects him, "That's Batman. I live in New York." So, again, it's one of those things where the mystique of the character, how they connect to other characters, that's interesting, probably what they're doing here. So it says, Monk pays his assistants well, but they still want to be paid more. And what is this about? So it says, Mr. Monk and Sharona outright states that Sharona got $950 a week, and Natalie gets $930 a week. That works out to about $49,400 a year for Sharona, and about $48K more, a little bit more a year for Natalie. That's on the low end of the average of nursing. So it says, if that's the case, then Natalie shouldn't have any reason to be complaining about Monk not paying her enough. So it goes on to say this. It says San Francisco has an extremely high cost of living and the most expensive real estate prices in the country. So $50,000 does not go too far there, especially a sole wage earner with a teenage son in the house. Which again is quite interesting with this aspect. This is also the layer of explaining the reason behind something that is cultivated in reality. So most of the time you see sitcoms or you see other situational, where it be drama, crime, what romance, what have you, whether it's television, whether it's film. There's always a dispense of reality of reason when you're like, how can they afford these things? When how can they do this? But when you get a character like Sharona is, actively saying, I don't get paid enough, but it seems like she should be fine. This theory here explains the disposition of, hey, getting back to the reality of the situation where they live isn't cheap. So that's something. And that's just evident enough of the aspects of how fan theories really flush out a lot of stuff when it's done right. All right, so Dale the Well killed Trudy. So it says he knew the name of the bomb maker. He hated Trudy. And every time he lets Monk have a new piece of information about Trudy's death, it leads to another clue within a clue. So odds are that Trudy was hot on the trail of something that he did. And he hired a Russian nesting doll chain of hitmen to take her out. And it says, there's another theory that says Captain Soldermeyer killed Trudy. It says, as the captain of the SFPD, he surely has enough influence to make sure Monk doesn't figure out what's actually happening if he really wants to cover it up. It says it's likely that Captain Soldermeyer committed some murder and couldn't have his reputation ruined. So as a result, he killed Trudy to distract Monk and give his case to other less competent detectives because of Monk's trauma. So again, this theory points into the aspects of not understanding the source. Because, if you understood Captain Soldermeyer and you saw his overall development of his before, when he's established and before he's divorced and how he is, and then after his divorce, solely, his character stayed true to the disposition that moral outweighs everything else. And so, this theory combats with that to where maybe the person is just having some biases about something that they just didn't take the time to really go into depth about the actual show. So, it says Monk really is an alien. It says after Mr. Monk and the UFO, someone had to post this one. It says he never did show anyone his belly button. Okay. It says Monk dies at the end. So it says he gets too close to the truth and they kill him. And it says Monk, in fact, does die eventually. It says this. Tony Shalhoub once said after the show had wrapped up that Monk had since passed on. And Big Joss in the recent Monk COVID TV special, however, seen seems the detective is still alive and kicking. It says Monk has a relapse at the end. It says because the writers are tickled. Excuse me, I'm sorry. It says because the writers are tickled at being forced to wrap up Trudy's storyline at the end of the season, since they want to keep writing the series for years and years and years and years instead of just excuse me. I say, he'll suddenly get somewhat better, then renew it. So, it says, I'm sorry, y'all. Wow. Oh, my goodness. I'm sorry about that, y'all. It says, I'm going to wrap this up with these different theories. 3 to be exact. The first theory says Monk's family are time travelers from 2020. So Ambrose never leaves his home. Adrian constantly washes his hand and sanitizes things with disinfectant wipes. Back then, it was weird, but now, not so much. Relating to the aspects of COVID, they already knew about it. They experienced it in their time. All right, so Randy and Sharona had already begun dating off screen by Mr. Monk and the bad girlfriend. It says when Mr. Monk and Natalie say that they have a secret to tell him, Randy asks if Natalie is in love with him, which strikes her as absurd and out of nowhere. However, if he and Monk's previous assistant had already begun dating, it makes more sense. He may also have been trying to figure out if he needed to let Natalie down gently. It says Dr. Nevin Bell is a descendant from Dr. Joseph Bell. It says he inherited his ancestors' knack of diagnosis via Sherlock scanning, like he does when he deducts the reason his patients can no longer stand his neighbor's piano playing. All right, so this reaches the end, and I'd like to know what you think. Feel free to reach out. All right, so tune in, turn up, and definitely take care. Bye-bye for now.